The year is 1994. The room is quiet. Conditioned air hums. Polished mahogany reflects the muted lights. This is the boardroom of the County Trust Bank. A young analyst named Mark Jensen shifts in his chair. He's 26 years old. He has an MBA from a state school. He believes in numbers. In front of him is a file. It's thick. The cover reads, Vance Agricultural Holdings. His boss had asked for a full asset review. The largest private landowner in 3 counties. Mark had spent a week on this. He'd traced every deed, every parcel, every water right. The numbers didn't seem real. Not for this part of the country. He flips a page. Net asset value, conservatively estimated. The number makes him pause. He checks his calculations again. They are correct. He keeps flipping. Past performance. Yields per acre. Profit margins. It's a masterclass in efficiency. Decades of it. No debt. Not a single loan against any of it. Everything bought with cash. Who was this person? Eleanor Vance. The name was local legend, but the numbers were national power. He gets to the back of the file, a miscellaneous section, old correspondence. Tucked into a paper-clipped bundle is a single sheet of paper, a carbon copy, faded blue ink. The bank's letterhead is from a different era. It's a loan application denial. Date, August 14th, 1961. Applicant, Eleanor Vance. Amount requested, $4,500. For the purchase of 1 Alice Chalmers Gleaner E combine. Mark reads the reason for denial. A single sentence typed neatly by a secretary long since retired. Then, a signature. Franklin Hayes, loan officer. Mark knew that name. Mr. Hayes had retired a decade ago. His portrait hung in the lobby, a pillar of the community. Beneath the signature, in Hayes's own handwriting, was a short note, as if for his own records. A justification. It read, Applicant is recently widowed. No husband or father on the property. The land itself is not sufficient security. A woman with no husband has no collateral. Mark Jensen stops breathing for a second. He looks at the faded blue words. A woman with no husband has no collateral. Then he looks back at the first page of the report, at the net asset value, a number with 8 zeros behind it. He looks at the denial letter again, $4,500. He looks back at the asset page. The gulf between the 2 documents is 33 years wide and a lifetime deep. The room is still quiet, but for Mark Jensen it is suddenly very loud. This is the story of that gulf. It's the story of what happens when someone tells you what you are not capable of, especially when they do it with a kind heart. This channel exists to tell these stories, the stories of people who were told no, who were written off, who were told they lacked the right collateral. If you believe these stories matter, subscribe. Because the world is full of people who build empires in the silence that follows the word no. Let me tell you about Eleanor Vance. Before the numbers, before the land, there was just the dirt and a promise. The story begins in the summer of 1961, a summer of heat and dust, and a quiet that was heavier than any sound. Eleanor Vance was 32 years old. She had lived on this farm her whole life, 160 acres of dark, rich soil. It was her father's farm, then it was hers and her husband's. She had worked it alongside them since she was old enough to walk. Her father, Thomas, taught her the land. He taught her to read the sky, to understand the language of the corn, the subtle shift in color that meant thirst, the way the leaves curled against the sun. Her husband, David, had taught her the machines, He loved the rhythm of a well-tuned engine, the logic of gears and belts. Together, the three of them were a perfect system. Thomas was the wisdom, David was the strength, Eleanor was the heart and the hands. She could run a planter and fix a fuel line. She could manage the books and predict a first frost. The farm was not a business. It was a life. It was their life. Then came a day in late July, a Tuesday. The sky was a pale, hazy blue. David and Thomas were clearing a fence line on the North 40. The old Ford 8N tractor was struggling on the grade. No one knows exactly what happened. A wheel in a rut, a shift in the load, a moment of imbalance. The tractor rolled. It happened fast. There was no time. By the time Eleanor got there, there was only silence. The heavy, awful silence of a world that has just ended. She lost them both in an instant. Her father and her husband. The wisdom and the strength. Gone. The funeral was a blur of casseroles and quiet pity. Neighbors stood in the yard. They spoke in hushed tones. They looked at Eleanor. They saw a widow, a woman alone. They saw a problem to be solved. Most assumed she would sell. It was the sensible thing to do. A woman couldn't run a farm like this by herself. It was too much. Too hard. They didn't understand. Selling the farm would be a second death. It would be burying the last part of them. The land was all she had left. The land held their memory. The dirt was their story. She would not sell. She would farm. But farming required tools, and their main tool was broken. The Massey Harris 21 combine was old when her father bought it. Now it was dying. The engine leaked oil. The belts were frayed. David had planned to replace it after this harvest. He'd even picked one out. An Alice Chalmers Gleaner E. It was smaller, more efficient, perfect for their land. The harvest was 6 weeks away. Without a working combine, the corn would rot in the fields. The soybeans would shatter on the stalk. A year's work would vanish. The farm would die. She had some savings, not enough. She needed a loan. $4,500. It was a simple calculation, a business decision. She made an appointment at the county trust bank. She put on her best dress. She gathered her father's ledgers. Years of meticulous records. Profits, yields, costs. The proof was in the numbers. The farm was viable. The farm was profitable. The loan was a sound investment. She walked into the bank feeling nervous but prepared. She was a farmer asking for a tool to do her job. It was that simple. She did not know that the world saw something else entirely. She was about to learn that the most important numbers aren't always written in a ledger. Sometimes they are assumptions, held in the minds of good men, who believe they are doing the right thing. The office of Mr. Franklin Hayes was quiet and orderly. The wood was dark. The leather on the chairs was worn smooth. Sunlight streamed through the large window, catching dust motes in its beam. On his desk was a picture of his family, a wife and 2 smiling sons. On the wall was a plaque from the Chamber of Commerce. Man of the Year, 1958. Franklin Hayes was a good man. Everyone in the county knew it. He was a deacon at the First Baptist Church. He coached the Little League team every summer. He served on the hospital board. He was kind. He was patient. He was respected. He greeted Eleanor with a gentle smile. He had known her father for 30 years. He expressed his condolences. His voice was sincere. He meant every word. He asked her to sit down. He offered her a glass of water. Eleanor felt some of her nervousness fade. This was Mr. Hayes, a friend of her father's. He would understand. She laid the ledgers on his desk. She opened them to the last 5 years. She pointed to the columns, the yields, the net profits. She explained the situation with the old combine. She explained the necessity of the new one, the Gleaner E. She had done her research. She knew the fuel efficiency, the maintenance costs. Her plan was sound. It was logical. It was undeniable. Mr. Hayes listened. He nodded. He looked at the numbers. He did not dispute them. He knew Thomas Vance had been a fine farmer. He knew the land was good. But he was looking at something else. He was looking at Eleanor. He saw a grieving daughter, a young widow. He saw a woman burdened with a man's work. In his mind, he was not a banker. He was a protector. He folded his hands on his desk. He leaned forward slightly. His voice was soft, paternal. "Eleanor," he said, "this is a fine farm. Your father was one of the best men I ever knew. These numbers prove it." Eleanor felt a wave of relief. He understood. Then he continued. "But a farm isn't just numbers and land, Eleanor. You know that. It's labor. It's hard, physical labor. It's 16-hour days when the harvest comes in. It's fixing an engine in the middle of the night. It's strength, a man's strength." Eleanor stiffened. She said, "I've worked this farm my whole life, Mr. Hayes. I know the labor involved." "I know," he said, his voice still gentle. "I know you do, and I admire you for it. But David and your father, they were strong men. Running this place took both of them. It's too much for you to handle alone." "It is not," she said. Her voice was quiet but firm. Mr. Hayes sighed. It was a sigh of genuine concern. He saw this as a kindness. He was saving her from failure, from heartbreak, from losing the farm in a foreclosure sale a year from now. He couldn't let that happen. Not to Thomas Vance's daughter. He spoke as if explaining a difficult truth to a child. "The bank has to consider its collateral, Eleanor. The land is part of it, yes, but the real collateral is the farmer. It's the certainty that the work will get done, that the crop will come in. That's the part we can't put a number on, but it's the most important part." Eleanor said nothing. She just watched him. He opened his hands in a gesture of helplessness. "I can't in good conscience approve this loan. It would be setting you up to fail. I'm not going to be the man who takes your father's farm from you. I'm sorry, Eleanor." He pushed the ledgers back across the desk. "My advice is to sell the land. Take the money and start a new life in town. It's the sensible thing to do." Eleanor stood up. She looked at this kind man, this good man, this man who thought he was protecting her. She said, "So the land isn't the collateral?" He shook his head sadly. "Not on its own, no." "Then what is the problem?" she asked. He finally said it, the words that would echo for the next 30 years. "Eleanor, a woman with no husband has no collateral." The drive home was 5 miles. It felt like 100. The truck bounced on the rutted dirt road. The engine noise filled the cab. But inside Eleanor's head, there was only silence. The banker's words played over and over. "A woman with no husband has no collateral." It wasn't said with malice, not with contempt. It was said with pity, with a certainty that was as solid as the bank vault itself. That was the part that hurt the most. He genuinely believed he was helping her. He had stripped her of her capability, not as an insult, but as an act of kindness. Have you ever been told you couldn't do something? Not by an enemy, but by a friend. By someone who thought they were protecting you from yourself. That is a different kind of fight. You cannot fight it with anger. You can only fight it with your life. Eleanor pulled into the farmyard. She killed the engine. She sat in the truck for a long time, looking at the house, the barn, the fields stretching out to the horizon, her father's world, her husband's world, her world. She finally got out. She walked into the farmhouse kitchen. Her mother, Sarah, was sitting at the table. She was 70 years old. Her hands were gnarled from a lifetime of work, but her eyes were clear. She had seen droughts and floods, good years and bad. She looked at Eleanor's face. She didn't need to ask what happened. She knew. Eleanor sat down. She told her mother what Mr. Hayes had said. She repeated the words, "A woman with no husband has no collateral." Sarah Vance listened without expression. She did not rage. She did not cry. When Eleanor was finished, Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she stood up. She walked over to an old wooden box on the mantelpiece. It held the original deed to the farm, signed in 1884. Her grandfather's name was on it. She put her hand on the lid of the box. She looked at her daughter. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of generations. "They came here with nothing but an ox and a plow," she said. "They broke this sod with their own hands. The bankers didn't give them this land. The government didn't give them this land. The land gave itself to them, because they worked for it." She looked out the window, at the fields. "They never owned the rain, Eleanor. They don't own the dirt. The land is enough." The words settled in the quiet kitchen. The land is enough. It was not a complaint. It was a creed. It was a statement of fact. Everything else was opinion. The bank, Mr. Hayes, the neighbors, their certainty was an opinion. The dirt under her feet was the fact. That evening, Eleanor drove into the small town. She didn't go to the bank. She went to the greasy, cluttered workshop at the edge of town, Gus's garage. Gus Mueller was a mechanic, a genius with a wrench. He could make any engine run. He had been her father's best friend. He was 65, covered in grease, and spoke in grunts. He was sitting on a stool, rebuilding a carburetor. Eleanor walked in. Gus looked up. He saw her face. He put the carburetor down. "Bad news," he grunted. "The bank said no," she replied. He swore under his breath, a short, sharp curse. "So," he said, "what's the plan?" "I can't afford the gleaner," she said. "We have to make the Massey work." Gus wiped his hands on a rag. He walked outside with her. They stood in front of the old combine. It looked tired, defeated. Gus walked around it slowly. He kicked a tire. He ran his hand over the rusted metal. "That engine's shot," he said. "The header's warped. Belts are rotten. It's a heap of junk, Ellie." "I know," she said, "but it's the only junk I've got." Gus was quiet for a long time. He looked at the machine. Then he looked at her. He saw the set of her jaw. He saw her father in her eyes. That stubborn refusal to be beaten. He nodded slowly. "Your dad taught you how to weld, didn't he?" "Yes," she said. "Good," he grunted. "You're gonna need it. Let's get to work." They didn't rebuild the Massey Harris 21. They reinvented it. The work started the next day. It consumed them. It was a puzzle of steel and ingenuity. Gus pulled the tired engine out of the combine. It was useless. A new engine was too expensive. So they went to the junkyard. They found a wrecked 1957 Ford F-100 pickup. The front end was smashed, but the engine, a 272 V8, was intact. Gus believed it would work. It had more power than the original. They hauled it back to the farm. For a week, the barn was filled with the sound of grinding metal, the clang of hammers, the hiss of a welding torch. They had to fabricate new engine mounts, reroute the fuel lines, design a whole new cooling system using a radiator from an old tractor. Eleanor did most of the welding. Her father had taught her well. Her beads were clean and strong. Gus would inspect her work, grunt his approval, and move to the next problem. The header was the next challenge. It was too heavy, too inefficient. It lost too much grain. Eleanor had an idea born from watching her father for years. She sketched it out on a piece of plywood, a new design, lighter, wider, with a different auger system to feed the grain more smoothly. Gus looked at the drawing. He studied it for 10 minutes. He said, "This might actually work." They built it from scratch, using sheet metal from a collapsed shed and bearings from a junked baler. It was ugly. It was a patchwork of salvaged parts, a Frankenstein's monster of a machine. They worked 16 hours a day, fueled by coffee and sandwiches her mother brought out to the barn. They finished it 3 days before the harvest was set to begin. The final machine looked like nothing else on earth. It was painted 3 different colors. The Ford engine rumbled with a deep, throaty sound. The custom header looked raw and unfinished. They called it the Mongrel. The day of the test was tense. Eleanor climbed into the driver's seat. Gus stood in the field, his arms crossed. She engaged the throttle. The machine roared to life. It lurched forward. The header bit into the first row of corn. And it worked. It worked better than they could have imagined. The new engine had so much power, she could run it at a higher speed. The lighter header floated over the ground, and the custom auger, it was almost perfect. It captured nearly every kernel. There was less grain loss than any combine in the county. They did the math later that night. The new Gleaner E from the dealer cost $4,500, plus interest. Their modifications cost $380 in salvaged parts, and weeks of labor that the world had deemed worthless. When the harvest was over, Eleanor's yields were 10% higher than her neighbors. 10%. That was the difference between profit and loss, between survival and failure. It was the margin created by being told no. The numbers didn't lie, and the neighbors started to talk. The talk happened at the grain co-op. It happened at the diner over coffee. It happened in the pews after church. At first, it was disbelief. People said she got lucky. The weather was perfect that year. That patched-up machine of hers wouldn't last another season. It was a fluke. Some of the talk was tinged with admiration. The older farmers, the ones who had known her father, they saw the work. They understood the ingenuity. They would see her in town and give a slow, respectful nod. They knew what it took. But others were skeptical, doubtful, even resentful. One of her neighbors, a man named Bill Peterson, stopped his truck by her field one afternoon. He was a successful farmer. He ran a modern operation. He leaned out his window. He thought he was being helpful. "That's a good-looking crop, Eleanor," he said. "You did well this year." "Thank you, Bill," she said. He chewed on a piece of straw. "You know," he said, "you should think about selling. Quit while you're ahead. You could get a good price for this land right now." Eleanor just looked at him. "Why would I sell, Bill?" "Well," he stammered, "this is hard work. You can't keep this up. That machine of yours is a curiosity, but it's not a long-term solution. You need modern equipment. That requires debt. It's a tough business for a woman on her own." Her voice was quiet, but it cut through his certainty. "I'm not on my own, Bill. I have the land." He shook his head, a small smile on his face, like she was a child who didn't understand. "You got lucky, Eleanor. Don't press your luck." He drove off, convinced he had given her good advice, convinced he knew her limits better than she did. Have you ever felt that? The quiet condescension of someone who has already decided who you are, who has measured your potential and found it lacking. They aren't trying to be cruel. They think they are being realistic. They think they are protecting you. What do you do with that? How do you respond? Let me know in the comments below. Because Eleanor's response wasn't in words. Her response was the next 30 years of her life. What she did next wasn't about proving Bill Peterson wrong, or Franklin Hayes wrong. It was about proving her mother right. The land is enough. Let me tell you about the next 3 decades. They didn't happen in a single dramatic moment. They happened one day at a time, one harvest at a time, one acre at a time. The story of Eleanor's expansion wasn't a sprint. It was a slow, steady, relentless march. The year is 1963. A drought hits the county. Corn withers on the stalk. Farmers who are over-leveraged, who bet on rain that never came, are ruined. Bill Peterson, her well-meaning neighbor, is one of them. The bank forecloses on his farm. The farm goes up for auction on the courthouse steps. Eleanor is there. She has had 2 good years. Her efficient machine and low overhead meant she had profits. She had savings. She buys his 160 acres. She pays cash. Franklin Hayes is at the courthouse that day. He sees the deed transfer. He sees her sign her name. He says nothing. He just watches. The year is 1968. An older farmer 2 miles down the road decides to retire. His children don't want the farm. He wants to sell to someone who will care for the land. He approaches Eleanor first. He respects her. He saw how she worked. She buys his 80 acres. Cash. The year is 1972. Eleanor pioneers a new system of crop rotation, something she read about in a university journal. It involves planting cover crops in the off-season. It enriches the soil naturally, reduces the need for expensive fertilizer. Her yields increase by 20%, while her costs go down. The other farmers think she's crazy until they see her crops. Then they start to copy her. That year she buys another 320 acres, the old Miller place. It borders her original farm. She pays cash. Franklin Hayes is now the bank president. He drives past her land on his way home from church every Sunday. He sees the new fields, the new grain silos, built and paid for. He sees her on a new, bigger tractor, one she paid for with a single check. He never waves. He just drives on, the witness who watches. The year is 1979. The national economy is in turmoil. Interest rates begin to climb. The first tremors of the farm crisis are felt. Farmers who rely on operating loans are squeezed. Their profit margins vanish. Eleanor has no debt. She owes nothing to anyone. She is insulated from the storm. She buys 2 more farms that year, both from families who are forced to sell. She doesn't haggle. She pays their asking price. A full 640 acres, cash. By 1980, she is no longer just a farmer. She is a force. Her name is spoken with a different kind of respect at the co-op. The whispers have stopped. Her methods are studied. Her success is undeniable. She never gloats. She never says, "I told you so." She just works. She buys more land, always with cash. The mantra her mother gave her has become a quiet truth across the county. The land is enough. It was more than enough. Then came the reckoning. The year is 1985. The farm crisis is a full-blown catastrophe. Interest rates are at 18%. Commodity prices have collapsed. Land values have plummeted. A generation of farmers is being wiped out. The county trust bank is dying. It holds the loans on dozens of failing farms. The paper value of their assets is evaporating. The FDIC regulators are circling. The bank is on the verge of collapse. The board of directors holds an emergency meeting. It's a grim affair. The men in the room are the grandsons of the men who founded the bank. They are watching their legacy crumble. Franklin Hayes is there. He is old now. His hands tremble slightly. He is retired, but holds an honorary seat on the board. The new bank president, a young man named Carter, lays out the situation. They are insolvent. They need a massive infusion of cash, a deposit of several $1,000,000, to stabilize their books and survive the FDIC audit. Otherwise, they will be closed, the doors locked, the bank will cease to exist. The room is silent. Where would they get that kind of money? No one has it. Everyone is broke. Then, a junior board member speaks up. His voice is hesitant. There is one person, he says. One person in this county who is not broke. One person who has no debt. One person who deals only in cash. He says the name. Eleanor Vance. The name hangs in the air. The irony is thick enough to choke on. Franklin Hayes closes his eyes. The memory of a day in 1961 is suddenly vivid. A young woman in his office. A denial letter. A kind refusal. The board agrees. It's their only hope. A delegation is chosen. The young president, Carter, and Franklin Hayes. They insisted he go. He was the one who knew her longest. They drive out to her farm. The farm that is now a vast empire of green and gold. They don't meet her in an office. She receives them in her farmhouse kitchen. The same kitchen where her mother spoke the words that changed her life. The room is simple, clean. A pot of coffee is brewing on the stove. Eleanor Vance is 76 years old. Her hair is white. Her face is a roadmap of sun and seasons. Her eyes are the same as they were at 32, clear and direct. She listens patiently as Carter makes his pitch. He is nervous. He explains the bank's situation. He explains what they need. A long-term deposit. $7 million. He promises a good rate of return. He talks about the bank's importance to the community, about its long history. When he is finished, the kitchen is silent. The only sound is the gentle bubbling of the coffee pot. Eleanor looks past Carter. Her eyes settle on Franklin Hayes. He is staring at his hands, folded on the kitchen table. He has not looked at her once. She speaks. Her voice is not triumphant. It is not angry. It is calm, factual. Franklin. He looks up. His eyes meet hers for the first time in over 20 years. Before I answer, she says, I need to ask you a question. The young bank president looks confused. Eleanor ignores him. Her focus is entirely on the old man. I need you to tell me, Franklin, does the County Trust Bank now consider a woman to be sufficient collateral? The silence that follows is absolute. It is heavier than any vault door. Carter, the young president, looks from Eleanor to Hayes. He is beginning to understand that this is not about money. Not really. Franklin Hayes looks at this woman he tried to save from failure. This woman who built an empire out of his kind refusal. He sees the decades of work in her face, the quiet, relentless proof of his mistake. His shoulders slump. The certainty he carried for a lifetime finally crumbles. His voice is a whisper. Yes, Eleanor, we do. He looks down at the table again. I was wrong. Eleanor nods slowly. She gets up and pours 3 cups of coffee. She sets one in front of each man. All right, she says. Let's talk about the terms. She saved the bank, but she did it on her terms. The first term was a seat on the board of directors. For the next 10 years, Eleanor Vance helped run the County Trust Bank. She didn't do it for power. She did it to change the rules. She dismantled the old way of thinking, the good old boy system of handshakes and assumptions. She forced them to look at the numbers, the real numbers, the business plan, the viability of the operation, not the gender or the marital status of the applicant. She championed a new program, a micro-loan fund for small farmers, for young people just starting out, for people who didn't have a family legacy of land. The other board members resisted at first. It was too risky, they said. Eleanor just looked at them. She said, "The biggest risk is telling capable people they can't." The program was approved. When she finally retired from the board, she didn't stop. She used the vast fortune she had built to create a new institution, the Vance Land and Labor Foundation. Its mission was simple: to provide capital to the people the other banks overlooked. The people who were told they lacked collateral. Women, minority farmers, immigrants. Her foundation didn't give handouts. It gave a foothold. Low-interest loans for equipment, grants for innovative farming techniques, mentorship from experienced agriculturalists. The legacy wasn't in the money. It was in the lives that money changed. By the year 2020, the foundation had helped launch over 400 new farms. It had infused more than $30 million into the rural economy. It helped a young woman with a degree in viticulture start a vineyard. The bank had told her the land wasn't right for grapes. Today, her winery is winning national awards. It helped a family from Guatemala buy a small plot of land. They built a thriving organic vegetable farm, supplying restaurants in 3 cities. The bank had told them their business plan was unrealistic. The ripple effect of Eleanor's life was not a fortune, it was a forest, planted from the seeds of other people's dreams. Dreams that would have died in the sterile quiet of a loan officer's office. Today, the foundation is run by her granddaughter, a woman named Sarah, named after her great-grandmother. She has Eleanor's eyes and her quiet determination. The work continues. The story does not end. Because legacy is not a monument you build, it is a road you pave for others to walk on. The main office of the Vance Foundation is not in a tall glass building. It's in a restored brick building on the town square, the old hardware store. Inside, it is modern and bright. But in the main office, behind the desk of Sarah Vance, there is a single object on the wall. It's framed under museum-quality glass. It's not a painting. It's not a photograph. It is a large, yellowed piece of butcher paper. On it, drawn in pencil, are the schematics for a combine header. The lines are rough. The notes in the margins are smudged with grease. It is the original design for the mongrel, sketched out by Eleanor Vance in her barn in 1961. Sarah, her granddaughter, sometimes stands before it. She touches the cool glass. She says people think it's a tribute to a machine, but it's not. It's a tribute to a specific kind of thinking. It is a monument to the moment you are told no. And instead of arguing, you go home and build a better way to yes. The most dangerous limitation is the one imposed by someone who genuinely believes they are protecting you. Certainty about another person's capabilities, delivered with kindness. It is more damaging than outright hostility, because it cannot be fought with anger. It cannot be debated. It can only be disproven, with decades of quiet, relentless, undeniable work. Right now, somewhere in the world, a good person is sitting behind a desk, and they are kindly telling someone else what they cannot do. They are explaining the risks. They are being sensible. They are protecting them from failure. And in doing so, they may be robbing the world of an empire. This story is for anyone who has ever been on the receiving end of that kindness. If you believe these stories need to be told, subscribe to this channel. It is our mission to find them and to honor them. Leave a comment below and tell us about a time someone underestimated you, a time you had to build your own way forward. And finally, share this story. Share it with one person who needs to be reminded that the only collateral that truly matters is the unwavering belief in your own hands and the simple, powerful truth that the land is enough.